Welcome to BlaqPod, the BlaqPod. Take two. Welcome to BlaqPod, the podcast for everyday people. I am Napiadi, and this podcast is about having conversations with people who inspire, who've had their journey and their life impacted in different ways. And today we have Braash. Braash, welcome to the BlaqPod, and we're so excited to have you because you're gonna, I'm interested in talking to you about your story, where you grew up, your family, and of course you and I are friends, and
Yep.
it's almost I thought that this first episode would be so great with you on it because then it will sort of set the trajectory for us in terms of the stories we want to tell. So welcome, Braash.
Yeah, thank you, Napiadi, or as I call you, Alexis.
Yeah.
I like that name. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. This is a great opportunity to tell my story.
Thanks, Braash. So on BlaqPod, I think what's key for us is to highlight achievements and innovations that people have taken on, where I know you as Braash Wakorangu, right? Senganga sa Pitori, as I want to call it. But I thought maybe let's start off about where you grew up and then take it through.
Yeah, I was born in Alexander, born in Baragwanath Hospital.
Sure.
Grew up at 2nd Avenue 2 years of my life, first 2 years of my life, and then moved to Garangua.
Okay.
From Alex, moved to Zone 6, Garangua, and that's where I grew up, and that's where pretty much I became Braash.
Okay, that's where you became Braash. But then I think growing up in Alex, for me, it's a surprise to start off with because I've always known you as a Rangua boy. But, the makeup of your family, who's at home, and also I think importantly, because for your parents who've just passed, I think it's just paying homage to them, telling that story, and also the makeup, because your brother, your sister, who are they? How do we build this journey so that we can tell your story?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, ke setlogolo sa Bakgatla, ke setlogolo sa Skegete. My mom was born to the Nhlapo family. My dad ke Mokgatla wa Marapian.
Okay.
Moemise ko Marapian.
Okay.
And being born in Alex was because we were staying at my grandmother's house.
Okay.
And we moved to Garangua from there. So my mom was a career nurse, theater nurse, and my dad sold insurance, but was a very creative person.
All right.
In his young days, he used to play tennis.
Yeah.
He used to string rackets for tennis rackets.
All right.
And he started a band called the Cats and Jama Kids with a few guys from Atteridgeville and Mamelodi, and loved singing. He loved singing. My dad would even sing Our Father, in his own way, his own version of Our Father. He used to be a very entertaining gent, especially after a couple of natives of his time.
Of his time.
Yeah. I think I inherited a lot of his creativity, his art, but mine manifests differently, right?
Okay.
My mother was a hard worker. My mother had a very big heart, had a very giving heart.
Yeah.
My mother was the glue that held us together. My mother was the love we got to know. My mother, everything that I think I am and what I aspire to be is influenced by who she was. By
your mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, God bless her soul, because she's recently passed.
Yeah.
But she was blessed with you, your sister, and your brother.
Yeah, so I'm the last of three. My older sister, Tebogo, and my middle brother, the colored, Alex, and myself.
Okay.
My brother and I are a year, 4 months apart.
Yeah.
As such, when we moved to Garangua, a lot of people thought we were twins.
Yes.
And because a lot of people thought we were twins, that came also with a lot of assumptions. But some of them were well supported. I mean, we were very naughty as young boys growing up in Garangua. Broke a lot of windows, broke a lot of car windows. A lot of the women on our street didn't really like us a lot because we were extremely naughty. Yeah, we were naughty. But I think it was more the, go outside and go play type.
Yes.
type of style of raising us.
Yes,
I mean, we grew up at a time where you could go outside and play. Our kids now, they go to the lounge and play, or go to their bedrooms and play.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, so growing up in Rankua, I know you went to Zoho.
Yeah.
It's just catch me up in terms of that journey, because I, in speaking to Zoho, for me, it's how I get to know you and the people that you surrounded yourself with. But let's catch me up from primary school all the way, and let's hear that story.
Yeah, so I went to Kagisanon Primary School, which is in Zone 6, not far from where I grew up. And from there I went to Tutotebe, which is not far from where we subsequently moved to in Zone 2.
Yes.
And I was a year in, it was called middle school then.
Okay.
So I was a year go to Tutotebe, and then I went to Zoho, which was a Catholic school with a convent and a church on the grounds.
Yes.
Not much of a sporty school, which was great for me because I suck in sports. But educationally, it was a very great school. It was an amazing, amazing school. And when I got to school, I got to make friends with some amazing people. And I think my development and my artistic growth grew because it was influenced by the nuns that were teaching us.
Yes.
Buying me a set of calligraphy pens because they could see how I write. And the things that I drew, the facilities that the school offered. I mean, we had a biology room, we had a library, we had a typing room. You don't see typing rooms anymore. We had a science lab. So if you did science, you didn't have to imagine the experiment.
Yes, true.
You actually could go to the science lab and you know what I mean? And that it was a massive influence in who I have become. And having met amazing people that I went to school with. I mean, I got there at standard 6. I don't know what grade it is now. And
I think maybe it's like grade 8,
Yeah. And the first person I became friends with was JJ Taban, Onkopot. And a guy called Linyai. Linyai is now called Dr. Linyai, and then a whole lot of other guys who became doctors and scientists and whatever. And we've had some greats, that we went to school with. We were class ahead of us, George Manyosi, Bendi Kobe, Brian Molefe went to the same school. And I'll remember the others. But we've got if you know a Denmarkan was a class behind, a standard behind you. So we went to school with, it produced quite good people. It actually produced amazing people. And to this day, we kind of gravitate towards each other, even at our, I would say, old age. So we gravitate towards each other.
So foundationally, do you then believe that from Zoho, you've then learned, or created a space for yourself for self-expression? Did it allow for that?
It did. It actually did. I think the lack of too much sports. We did sports, but it was more what the schools today do, They do sports when they open, and then that's it for the year. Unless they actually have a good sports program. We were not more of it. We were more of an academic school than anything else, and we were reminded of it all the time. But it also allowed us to be who we are. It gave us space to become who we wanted to be. Career guidance was not limited to a lawyer, a teacher, a nurse.
Okay, get it.
So I think it did give us a space to become who we wanted to be, and it definitely influenced me.
So you finished Zoho what year?
88.
So you moved there. You moved from Zoho to where? Where do you matriculate and go to?
So after matric, I went to Stlogelo Tech, which is now TUT in Garangua.
All right.
I was there. I did fashion design. And that was 1989.
Okay.
And I think at the end of that year, we went on strike. And the following year, I then moved to Joburg.
All right.
Went to Kirsten Academy of Fashion, which was in the CBD of Joburg. Obviously, then the CBD was different from now. I stayed in Pimville for 8 months, or 5, by my aunt's house. And moved to Hillbrow.
Okay.
And that was the beginning of the life in the city.
So for me, it's interesting where you have a guy from a former Bantustan, let's call it that, right? Who moves to Johannesburg and wants to study fashion. What does that say in the hood?
Look, I think we grew up at a time where arts were not, parents frowned upon it, You said I want to do fashion design. I don't know what that is, but my mom was quite inspirational. My mom would say, do what you want.
Okay.
Do what you love, do what you want. But what you must be sure of is that you're gonna make it.
Okay.
Be passionate enough to make it.
Make it.
Love it enough to make a living.
Okay.
Don't do it just because you say you're passionate about it.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, there's nothing that comes of it.
Okay.
So I think when you have support like that, it's easy for you to make something of what you choose.
100%. Yeah. So you come out of the supportive family.
Yeah.
You find yourself in, so Pimville, I hear it's later bustling.
Yeah.
But Johannesburg, Hillbrow.
Yeah.
Paint the picture.
Josie Maboni.
Yay.
Yeah, that was rough. That was very rough. I think anybody that moved to Joburg around 1990, 1991, we were all very excited. Okay. From Mariston Hotel to you name all these buildings, Ponte City, and you had guys staying at Ponte, you had guys staying at Mariston Hotel. I used to stay at a building called Coronia, and I had a couple of flatmates, obviously, and it was life in the city. I mean, we could walk from Hillbrow to Carlton Centre via Small Street. It was life in the city. It was inspiring. And it was a melting pot of people from everywhere, Lesotho, Botswana, Swaziland, you name it, Eastern Cape, Limpopo, not so much Limpopo, I think, but Limpopo was our drop. But, never fell Midred. So, Lipitori. Yeah, so you got to kind of mix with different people, with different ideas, with different backgrounds, how they grew up, what influenced their lives, what influenced them being in that same space with you at that particular time,
So influences, how does this change? So you're studying fashion.
Yeah.
Do you finish? What becomes the graduation? Who does Ashley Moemise from Rangua become as he grows into? So it's 90. I mean, it's the 90s, right?
Yeah, it's an early
Nelson
90s,
Mandela's coming out of jail. The country's changing. There's movement.
Yeah.
What becomes of you then?
So it was quite very interesting because I then finished fashion school, moved back to Garangua. You're like, did I make the right choices? This doesn't seem like it's working out.
Yeah.
I was not a fan of sewing.
Okay.
I like the drawing part. I like the creative part.
The creative part.
And took a while. Then I met a guy from Mafikeng, worked for Mabana.
Yeah.
And he was like, there's programs at Mabana that can work for you.
Okay.
Then I moved to Mafikeng.
All right.
Yeah, I just up and left, went to Mafikeng.
Yeah.
With the promise of a job.
Yes.
Was in Mafikeng for a while, met a couple of people, made friends in Mafikeng, and nothing really came out of being in Mafikeng.
Yeah.
And then I met my ex-wife. She was at Mabato High.
Yeah.
Came back to Garangua, followed that trail.
Yes.
Back to Botswana.
Yes.
And 2 years later, I think 93, late 93, I came back to Joburg and then worked for a fashion house, Prince & Company, at Carlton Centre. Yeah.
What were you doing?
I was an assistant fashion designer.
All right.
Yeah.
And so you could draw then and not have to cut patterns and...
I could do my favorite thing. I could create.
So at this point, your firstborn is not born yet?
No, it's not born yet.
Not born yet. So you're in Carlton.
Yeah.
Making fashion.
Back in Hillbrow.
Yeah. Having a great time.
Having a lekker time.
Okay. And then how do we graduate? How do you become 1994, 95?
Yeah. No, so 93, late 93, I moved to Yeovil.
Okay, yes.
Linda is expecting my first child.
Yeah.
And then I joined SA because a lot of my clientele, so I had private clients.
Yes.
A lot of my clientele were flight attendants.
Yes.
And they were like, you could actually do what we do.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
So you joined SAA 1990?
1995.
1995.
Yeah. March 95.
Okay. Yeah. So there was, obviously, in my mind, I'm thinking apartheid, you move over.
Yeah.
And there's black flight attendants.
Yeah.
Had there always been?
There were 3 at that moment.
Okay.
At that time.
Yeah.
There were 3 black flight attendants. 2 were from the same family, the Machila family.
Yeah.
Which I'm subsequently related to.
Okay.
And then there was...
Yeah,
well, I did. You know what? It was not even a planned career.
Yes.
It was people coming and saying, there's this thing.
Yeah.
I think you'll be a right fit. We've got people like you. Don't you wanna, what I mean? Don't you wanna do this? And I was like, okay, let's give it a try. I went for the interviews.
Yeah.
I was a bit big, so I had to start running for a few months.
Okay.
While I'm doing the interviews, so that I can come in weight.
Yes.
And got in.
Okay.
And once I was in, I was like, by the way, what do we do here? They were like, no, we serve customers food. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine it,
Oh, no,
like you're gonna give customers food. I was like, okay, yes. I've never flown before. Yes. So I don't even know what this is.
Yes,
Yeah. And I think because it was a default job, not really a career. I really didn't care. The thing was, can I get in? I got in. And also, Tsholofelo was born. And now I didn't want a situation where Tsholofelo needs diapers. And I'm hey, let me, with a child there, one needed something stable, something so that you can provide. So that's how I joined the airline. And I ended up in the airline. So I did chicken or beef for 13 years. Something that I started with reservation became something that I love so much. I really, really, really loved it. I think first 2 years were like, I don't know why I'm here. And then I bought my first house. I was like, okay, it seems like And then I bought my first car and I was like, okay, then I bought my second house. And I was like, but also I started falling in love with not just not necessarily the chicken or beef, but the destinations. The fact that this job can take me around the world. Having stayed 2 years in Botswana earlier, before I came back to Hillbrow, kind of excited me, because you're in a different country, people think differently. And if if you go to Botswana and you stay in Botswana for a while, you realize that they're completely different from South Africans.
100%.
Yeah, we like a tie and a name tag. Botswana, they like land. Even if they have a Thai job and a name tag,
the land.
Weekend they and I love that. I love the sense of entrepreneurship in them. Even though they had jobs. Even if it's raising cattle, but for them it was something that they're doing. That was a part of who they are, their makeup. And now SAA offered me this opportunity to you land in Dar es Salaam. You're in. Then you go to Rwanda, you find yourself in spaces where you didn't even think you would go, and then you go international, outside your Lagos, your Ghana, your Senegals, or you then find yourself in London, you find yourself in New York, you find yourself in Miami, you find yourself in South America and Asia, and then it opened up my world. For somebody as creative as I am, it really, really did open my world.
So fatherhood then, inspires you in the beginning of the career, and then you start loving this traveling, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about the first time you land in a different country, not on the continent, but perhaps what do you do when you get to outside, internationally? What is the first country you go to, and what is that experience like?
So my first destination was London. Okay. Back then we stayed longer.
In the country. Okay.
Yeah. So landed in London, and the thing is, you're so used to going through an airport and immigration and when you land in London, the first thing you experience as a flight attendant is that you have to go on the tarmac, pick up your bag, get into a bus.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah.
And then you use the back gate.
Yes.
Yeah. You never go through the airport.
The airport. Yes,
yeah, in London, specifically Heathrow.
Okay.
And then as you're driving into the city, it's like, I don't know how to describe it, but you have that, wow, so I am here.
Yeah.
This is me here. Yes. I never in my life had this in my life plan. Yes. It was never in my life plan.
Yes.
It was nothing I imagined.
Yes.
My big thing was because we grew up in an apartheid system. The creative in me.
Yes,
yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah, even I see and buy myself a decent car and raise a family in a nice. I never imagined where I was. And I must say there was a lot of gratitude at that moment. I was like, you must be blessed to find yourself in spaces like this. Yes. And the funny thing that most people don't realize is that SAA will pay for a 5-star hotel.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So we're staying in a 5-star hotel. You know, down the road is Harrods.
Yeah.
You know, and you can walk to a park. You can
Yes.
walk through London. You use the underground and you start experiencing the city.
Yes.
And it was such an overwhelming feeling.
Okay.
You almost wanted to stay in your room.
Yeah.
You just wait until you went home because you're kind of overwhelmed. You know, yeah.
But that's all Monday. What year is this?
This is 96.
This is 96.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see the shift in thinking,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because then you've had the segregation, you've had to integrate, you've got the other countries that
Yeah.
you've seen. The first African country you go to, which
Yeah.
one is that one?
So the first African country, look, from a structure point of view, you would go to Zimbabwe, you'd go
Okay.
to, you know, especially if you're staying overnight.
Yeah.
So you'd either go to Zimbabwe or Zambia
Yes.
to stay overnight.
Yes.
So those were my first.
Yes.
And then Cape Verde,
Yeah.
or Cabo Verde, as they call it. We stayed at Santa Maria, which is island of salt, Ilha de Sol.
Yeah.
And that was on our way to New York. So that
Okay.
was our stopover whenever
okay.
I went to the US.
Yes.
So my first would have been Zim.
Would have been Zim.
But it would have been an overnight stay.
Yeah. And then obviously the SADC region you've traveled. I mean, you're in Botswana, you're here today.
Yeah.
So traveling takes you into a different sense of being.
Yeah.
Right? It opens up the world and opens up conversations differently. How do you find your relationship with home while you're traveling the world and experiencing these different spaces and people? How do you find that marriage between yourself and home?
So when we talk about home, are we talking about South Africa or
I think essentially your community.
my
right?
community? Yeah. You know, it opens up your mind.
Yeah.
When you start traveling, you start experiencing different things. You see different things. People do things differently, and it kind of changes who you become.
Yeah.
You know, not who you are, but who you become.
Yeah.
Because then there's certain conversations you're like, but these are delaying conversations.
Yeah.
I really don't want to be in this space
Yes.
having this conversation.
Yeah.
You know, and I think also that being a flight attendant helps because most of the weekends you're not home.
Okay, yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're working.
Yes.
So you're home at times where other people are at work.
Yes.
So you end up not having those conversations anyway. But when you do, you know, you start thinking, why can't we shift the way we think?
Yeah.
Why aren't we? And I was young.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't we buying property? Why aren't we? So it started shifting there.
Yes.
But also, I was like, you know, there's so many things happening out here.
Yeah.
I started noticing, what is it that we don't do at home?
Okay.
What is it that I can pick up from this and apply at home?
Yes.
So each country I went to, I picked up a little bit of something.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
I didn't know yet what
that it was infusing into your being.
Yeah. And also what it would be, what it would become.
Yes.
You know, and how it would change my life.
Yes.
But I knew there was change happening. I knew something was happening.
Was shifting.
In my mind. Mm-hmm. I knew something was happening in my heart.
Yes.
I started falling in love with certain destinations, not liking, like for instance, I was too tired of going to London. I was like, I don't like this place. You know, every second person you hear speaks Xhosa or Afrikaans. I'm like, don't want to be here. You know, but also what I found fascinating when I traveled in Europe, especially, was architecture.
Yes.
That was something else.
So which will feed into part of the conversation we'll have a little bit later.
Yeah.
Right. So 13 years at SAA, you're a dad, you're a husband, you've got 3 children by 13 years when you come out of SAA?
Yeah, 3 children, yeah.
3 children out of the SAA. So the next move, where do you move to? What do you
become? While I was still at SAA, you always have to think. A lot of the guys we found at SAA never wanted to leave SAA. There was a thing at SAA called Vliegers my Leven.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't think I subscribe.
Yeah.
I don't want to do Vliegers my Leven. Yeah, and also you have boys.
Yes.
The kids are growing up.
Yes.
And as they're growing up, there's a need for you to be around more.
100%.
Even though compared to an average 9-to-5er, I spend more time with my children than an average 9-to-5er. But you start realizing that, this can be the be-all and end-all. And also from a career perspective, at SAA, I had reached the ceiling as a flight attendant.
Okay.
Meaning, if I want to go further up, I have to go on the ground.
Yes.
And do a 9 to 5.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm not a 9 to 5. I was not
No.
built for 9 to 5. The same way I was not built for war.
Yes,
I was not
you're
built for 9 to 5. While 9 to 5 is like going
Yeah,
to
yeah.
war. Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. So I started noticing certain things, like when I started having business ideas. But I've always ran a business while I was at SAA.
Okay.
So I had a design studio.
Okay.
And I had a partner.
Yeah.
That worked. So whenever I flew to the East, I'll buy fabrics. Whenever I flew to Asia, I'll buy fabrics.
Yes.
And would develop that. So there was that going on.
Okay.
Right. But then that also was not, I knew that it's not enough to bring in, to sustain what I have already built.
Okay, yes.
So I needed something bigger, something bolder, something that can sustain me.
Yes.
And the things I've accumulated, because you accumulate things.
Yes.
13 years, you accumulate quite a bit. So I started noticing the things like restaurants.
Yeah.
I'd ask, how do you keep champagne bottles from losing labels?
Okay.
Yeah. Because all the hotels we stayed at had restaurants at the at the foyer.
Yeah.
So you'd ask, and then you go, like, for instance, in DC, there was a restaurant called Oya.
All right.
And I loved the deco.
Okay.
I loved the simplicity of it, the cleanliness of it, the clean lines. And then I started noticing more and more of these, there was another poetry spot in DC that I like to go to, and that also kind of influenced what we could do. Yeah. So this thing started growing in me. And then we started hosting on weekends when I'm home.
Okay. Yes.
We'd host friends. We'd cook, they'd pay. Yes. And we'd play music. Yes. And then we started collecting bossa nova, lounge. Yeah. And that kind of got that wheel turning. Know. And people were like, but why don't you guys start something formal? Yeah. Because every month we're here. Yes. We have to pay for your services. We love being here. The music is great. We do live bands. We do a combination of live bands and DJs. But mostly friends we grew up with and people that I worked with. Yeah. So the influence from flying is that I got to start noticing these things. You go to London, you go to China, you see, or you go to the East, you see how they maximize small spaces. Okay, yes. And I started realizing that I'm loving this thing. Yeah. I love these environments. I started going to more restaurants. Yes. So I'd go to London, go to a Jamaican restaurant, experience Jamaican food. And, you go to Senegal and you go to a restaurant on the beach and it's a different atmosphere from
it's a different vibe
in Hong Kong.
Yes.
On the street, Temple Street Market. Yes. And having seafood that's alive that they have to clap before you eat. So it really, really influenced my next chapter.
So your next chapter for me when I meet you is Pretoria North. Yeah. And we are in Wonder Park. Yeah. And somebody says, yo, you gotta meet this guy, Ashley. He's my cousin. I think it's your cousin who introduced us, right? Yeah. You gotta meet Ashley. He's got a restaurant, and we come. And it is a very nice, very small spot, but bigger than what I'd anticipated in terms of the people that I met there and how it permeates. So perhaps that story. How do you start Afro Lounge Wonder Park?
Okay. So like I said, a lot of these influences were during the time that I was flying. Yes. So we put together a business plan and, you go to this company, that company, and they tell you, this thing's not going to work. Obviously, I started with my bank, the bank said, no, we're not going to do that. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm not giving up on this dream. Yeah. So then I went to funders, different funders, and eventually found a funder who was willing to risk it all. Yeah. So that funding happened. The restaurant was opened. But even the approach of design was more, I wanted to interrupt the white spaces.
Well, yes.
That was from a design point of view. Yeah. I didn't want to open a mohodu spot. Yes. I wanted a restaurant where when you look at it, you want to be in it. Yeah. You want to be part of that culture. You want to be part of that space. Yes. You see yourself in that space. It really speaks to who you are. Yeah, true. As a customer. Yeah. And from a design perspective, that's what I wanted to do. Yeah. So when we started Afro Lounge, the whole idea came from pretty much all the experiences. Yeah. How do we put this thing together? Yes. How do we put it together in such a way that it speaks to the people that we want to attract? Yes. We wanted our clients to see themselves in that space. We wanted them to identify with the space. Yes. We wanted it to speak to who they are. Yeah. You know what I mean? And from a menu perspective, we wanted to take them on a journey. That's true. On an African cuisine journey. Yes. Without having to leave Pretoria North or South Africa, and they can experience the continent
100%.
through our menu,
Yes.
you know. And we did a lot of research in that menu. We didn't just want to be a mogodu spot.
Yeah.
We wanted to be a classy mogodu spot.
Of
we
course.
wanted to interrupt because restaurant spaces at that time were dominated by News Cafe, Capello.
Yes.
And everybody was talking about, why don't you start a franchise?
Yes.
We did start there. We started talking to News Cafe, and I was like, but I'm going to manage the space. I'm not going to own it.
So these are your competitors at this point, right?
Yeah, they are. These are my neighbors.
These are your neighbors.
When I opened,
Yes,
these are my neighbors.
100%.
Yeah. These are my neighbors. But I started there before I decided, because I think it also gave me perspective. Is that I go borrow money.
Yes.
I open a restaurant.
Yes.
I put your name on it.
Yes.
So essentially, I'm managing your dream.
100%.
Right.
So that was the consideration.
Yes,
first.
that was the consideration.
Oh, to have a
to
franchise.
have my the reason why I didn't want to go the franchise route was because I realized I'm gonna be a manager, but I'm gonna have to borrow the money to be able to manage my own sport.
100%.
But it's your dream, your idea, your brand.
Yes.
And I didn't like that.
Okay.
It didn't sit well with me. So that's when the concept of Afro Lounge came about.
Yeah.
But where the name came from is that there's a Putamayo range of lounge music.
Okay.
And one of the CDs is called Afro Lounge.
I didn't know that. That's very cool. Okay.
So I was in Germany and I'm looking at this collection. I'm like, Afro Lounge. So I bought the CD and I listened to a lot of the tracks that were in it, and I loved it.
Yeah.
So when the time came, we were like, okay, we want to open an African restaurant, but a very classy African restaurant. But you didn't want to call it an African restaurant. So Afro Lounge Kitchen Bar became the name.
Okay.
So we went and met up with an interior designer called Gijsbert, and what was fascinating was that he said, it's the first time that I sit with people. Yeah. And they have to tell me what to do. Okay. So all I needed him to do was pencil out what I was thinking. Yes. I didn't want him to think for me. Yes. I said, this is what I want, this is how I want it, and what he came up with was what people got to experience, right? And I was very involved in the build. There's a reason why I'm telling you this. I was very involved in the build because for me it was interesting to see this dream come to life. Okay. So all these experiences that you've fetched in different spaces, and now they're coming together in one space. Coming together, yes. Yeah. But also what I didn't realize was going on site every day, making sure this thing comes together the way we dreamt it, the way we spoke about it, the way we penciled it out, is happening, right? Yeah. And everybody was like, why do you come here? Because, you've got a project manager. Yes. And I'm like, no, it's fine. I don't mind driving all the way and being here in this space. And I think it also, when you see this dream come alive, it takes away that fear. Of being daring? Of having to... The fear of, am I going to... we all talk about being entrepreneurs, but there's 100%. That fear of failure. Yes, true. There's a fear of failure, and it's real, and it's okay. Yeah. Because that's a fuel that keeps you going, And then subsequently we opened on the 14th of October, 2007. Yes. And we didn't have a liquor license. Yeah, we didn't have a liquor license. Are these the daily liquor licenses that come around? No, funny enough, what we did is that, and that's where you start learning a whole lot of stuff. What we did is we then went and spoke to a whole lot of the alcohol reps. Yes. And you always find favor with somebody. Yes. That always happens. Yes. And we found favor with a lady from DGB. Yes. Right? And this lady from DGB provided us with a lot of wine. Okay. I mean, a lot of wine. So it was promotional stuff. Okay, yes. So the approach, and also when we started a year later from the time we got the loan. Yes. So we didn't have enough money to buy stock. I got you. Yeah. So what we did then is we had to hustle everything from food to liquor. So we actually asked people for samples. Yes. Samples of chicken, samples of chips, samples of this, samples. And it's weird that they don't give you 20 grams of chips. No. They give you a whole box of chips. They give you a whole box of chicken. Yes. We had a whole menu from samples for the first week at least, wow, and that got us going. Yes. And we pour wine, for free at the beginning. Yes. And that kind of taught us how to evolve, how to fix glitches in the system. Yes. It taught us how to navigate this river. And sometimes it runs fast, sometimes you're drowning, sometimes you're not drowning. And I think because we were baptized with fire from the beginning, yes, it became easier to actually then navigate. To navigate. So when I was thinking of inviting you to the podcast, and really thinking, how would you add value to BlaqPod and the conversation?
is actually the idea. The first thought I had that I pitched in my own mind was actually would talk about failing fast, right? Because in the restauranteering part of it, that's where the failing fast comes from. There was almost like a 13-year sort of cushion, right, where you could build your career, where you can grow. But this failing fast, where Afro Lounge starts to begin. I mean, I think, in how you tell the story, I know you're telling it, but it's such a valuable story to entrepreneurs who are scared to step out of the mold, who are scared to step out of the 9 to 5, who are scared to then say, okay, how am I going to do this, and what does it mean to actually iterate fast, fail fast, right? So you're serving samples, you're doing all of that. How do you become fully fledged? When do you become fully fledged?
So the samples got us going for a period of time, right? And then with those samples, when you make money, you buy new stock. You know what I mean? You start growing. And for us, because of the way we set up the restaurant, it's funny. A lot of people thought it was a white-owned restaurant.
Yes, of course.
And Capello was next door.
Yes, Capello.
So a lot of black people thought, this is a white-owned restaurant, we'll go next door. Yes. And then they soon discovered it's actually not a white-owned restaurant, it's actually black-owned.
Yes.
And that kind of gave us a quick turnaround. And a lot of people fell in love with what we had to offer, from food to bar. And I mean, having flown around the world, my bar menu was out of this world. I can tell you that for free.
Okay.
It was out of this world. I provided cigars. I provided, I mean, that was early days. And we sold cigars. We sold, our wine list was decent. And I think that gave us an edge, and it also helped us grow because then we attracted the right people, right? And we also had a no under 24 policy.
Yes.
Because I think after the first month, we realized that Capello has got a whole lot of young people.
Yes.
So if we do an under 24, no under 24 policy, we then grab the adult population that stays there, right? And which worked for us because if a table next door bought 12 beers at 18 rand, right? This is like 6 guys buy 24 beers.
24 beers.
My table, 2 guys and 2 ladies, a bottle of Rupert and Rothschild, a bottle of Glenfiddich 12, and mixers. That's while they're waiting for the food.
Yes.
So you can tell the difference in income. At that point.
Yes.
How much each table we made relative to what they were making next door because of the age group.
Yes.
Right? And we stuck to it. People were like, this is not sustainable. And it was sustainable.
It was.
Because we were in a residential environment, the older people knew they had a spot to go to.
Yes,
the younger people knew they had a spot to go to.
Yeah.
And it worked. Yeah. Funny enough is that the owner of Capello used to send his friends to come wait for him next door. He was like, somewhere next door.
Yes.
So, it kind of validated everything we had dreamed of. It kind of said we are on the right track. I mean, we were not winning, but we were on the right track.
So Ash, a part of the story that I need to cover, right, is that you and your ex-wife were 2 artists, right? And that's important for me because it talks to you how not only did you go and study, because that's important. I think some people sort of think sometimes you just fall into things, right? So you go and you study. You have to think about the audience that you're talking to. The right segmentation at 24 plus, that's what you went into. Being at Afro Lounge also said you got to dress well and look smart and be in the right place. You can't just come dressed.
Oh yeah, no, we never wanted.
You were always that guy.
Yeah, I was that guy. Like don't come here like you're going to the loo.
Yes.
And you're like, okay,
yes. But building your audience was important, and how you built it was also almost like the market had to respond to your brand in a particular way, and that's how the market responded, right? My favorite piece of being at Afro Lounge Pretoria North was, which we'll talk to how you then go to the next one, was the I Am an African map on the wall, and how it spoke to the essence of your brand. So perhaps taking from that leap of your Africanness and taking that forward in terms of how does it inform the journey of restauranteering and how you grow into the next Afro and the next things you do?
Look, I think when most people my age, we never grew up in restaurants.
Of course.
Yeah, you'd be in a taxi and like,
and then it's about KFC fare.
Yeah, it's about wimpy at best.
Yes.
And I think most of us, even if we started anything, we didn't really know. We would really copy what others are doing.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And in essence, anything you would know would be Shebini Kokas.
Yes.
But there wouldn't be food being served.
Yeah.
Right? At that point, I think Sakumzi was just the house.
Okay.
And they were sitting on a bench under a tree.
Yeah.
And up the road was Nambita.
Yes.
And that was part of the influence as well.
Okay.
To say, I see what they've done, but I think they're lacking something.
Yeah.
For me, and I think it was more from a creative point of view.
Yeah.
Not really from a business point of view, because their model worked for them.
Yes.
I wanted an African space that didn't say we must wear beshu, you know? I wanted an African space that represented who we were, how we lived.
Yes.
Now.
Yeah.
But that doesn't take away from the fact that even if I live in a modern space and I interact with modern things, I still respect tradition, I still respect culture.
Yeah.
That's why we washed hands before people ate.
Yes.
That's why we serve food in small pots.
Yes.
That's why we use tagines to pay homage to Moroccan food when we served Moroccan food.
Yes.
And also in the design, we incorporated brown, a lot of brown. We used to call it the brown box.
Yes.
Yeah. But also it was the richness of that brown that spoke to the gold in the earth, that speaks of the richness of our soil, you know, from growing plants to the minerals that's in it.
Yeah.
The white was more for cleanliness.
Yes.
People thought it was for purity. No. I wanted a clean restaurant.
Yes.
So we make it white.
Yes.
So we can clean, and if it's dirty, you can see it. You know? Yes. And my concept was, my mother always hated eating in restaurant, and I always said, why? It's like, restaurant kitchens.
Yeah.
So I kind of, when we did the kitchen, I wanted a kitchen where I could say to clients, oh, come see my kitchen.
Yes.
And I don't have to go and check if the kitchen is in order.
Yes, true.
And being the drill sergeant that I am, which came from SAA, most people didn't really like me. It was because when we work. Yes. And you bring your A game. Your 100% is your 100%. But bring your 100%.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? So that's what I expected from my team at Afro Lounge. So when I could take anybody into the kitchen at any time.
Yeah.
So that spoke to how we see ourselves.
Yes.
I mean, so cleanliness is part of who we are as Africans. The concept of the restaurant was to say, this is who we are as Africans.
Yes.
And this is our space. It speaks to who we are.
Yeah. So building a brand, right?
Yeah.
Building a brand not only because we are eating, we're drinking, but building a brand with heart behind it, with a story behind it, with I think about the chairs you had at a particular point, you know, and how you curated the space. And I think perhaps the journey of, okay, we move from, and that's the failing fast, right? We move from Pretoria North. Yeah. We moved to town. Yeah. But that journey to get you to the biggest space you had for Lounge, how does that story then pan out?
Yeah, that was a very difficult. It was bittersweet. We built in a new mall. Yeah. With hopes, because people will give you data. Yes. And say, there's so many cars passing, there's so many people living here. Yes. This is the LSM, this is what they earn, and wow. And you kind of make decisions on that basis 100%. To say, okay, it could work. It's not 100%. Work.
It could work. The data says it could.
Yeah, the data says it could.
The data says it could.
And we soon realized that it's more a takeaway kind of environment and not a sit-down environment.
Yes. Residential being close.
Yes, residential being
so it's not a destination.
No, it's not a destination. They don't see it that way. And also, the mall was not making an effort from a marketing perspective. Yes. So they had another mall in Silver Lakes, just outside Silver Lakes. Okay. That those guys built this mall. Okay. Right? Now they would bring the companies there to market there. And we were like, but we don't understand how you're not marketing this mall and us, but you're marketing. So we had many meetings as tenants. And as tenants started falling off, Capello fell off, a couple of people fell off, and eventually we had to look at it and be honest with ourselves to say, okay, cool, this as a brand makes sense, right? We've really built a solid brand. Yes. And we have a following, but it's not sustainable. Our following come to the restaurant during the week after traffic.
Yes.
When they come off work.
Yes.
But in the morning they get on the R80 and they all go to Pretoria,
Kotropo, yeah.
And that was also an assessment we could only do being at the space.
Yes,
you couldn't
have done it.
Yeah, because now you're looking at data.
Yeah,
during the day you see cars going into Wonder Park. You're like, no man, there's a lot of people, right? So it was a hard one. It was really a hard one. And then a guy, one of our clients, said, I know the editor of True Love. I was like, huh, you do? I was like, yeah. I can speak to her and then we can feature the place. And they featured the place on True Love, and then a friend of mine saw it, and then he said, look, I saw this thing on True Love. He was a regular client.
Yes.
He said, I saw you on True Love. I saw the story.
Yes.
You know what? I want to speak to a friend of mine.
Yes.
They've started a funding company, IDF.
Yes.
IDF, Identity Development Fund.
Yeah.
I'm going to speak to them, and then let's see what happens from there. That guy left on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
Monday evening, emails were flying between me, him, and IDF.
Yeah.
And IDF came on board, looked at the space. They spent a week, a month. They were like, this actually works.
Yes.
You're just in the wrong spot.
Uh-huh.
By that time, the State Theatre had approached us and said, don't you want to open another restaurant?
Yes.
At the theatre?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. What year are we here now?
We in 2014, late 2014. Well, early 2014.
Okay.
No, 2009.
Yeah.
2009, not 2014.
No.
2009. Yeah, and we sat down with the State Theatre. We went there, we looked at the space. Our mentor came met us there, looked at the space, and we looked at their program. Now we're wiser, right?
Of course.
Yeah, we don't want to look at data.
Yes.
Yeah. We want to see your program. Yes. Yeah, what do you have?
Yes.
What is the attendance say?
Yes.
What are your plans for the next year, 2 years?
Yeah.
We don't want to come here and shut down from one location, come to this location,
and then have the same
issues, right? So, our mentor was like, what, I think this can work. Number one, all our clients drive to town in the morning.
Yes.
So they're here.
Yes.
They can come here for lunch.
Yep.
These are the existing ones. The issue is about the existing clients. Okay. They're in town.
Yes, they're in
After
town.
work, before they come to you, in Pretoria North,
they're waiting.
They set out traffic somewhere in town.
Yeah.
Right? So now their spot is in town.
You can capture
You capture them.
Yeah.
And when IDF said we can fund the move, we were like, yes.
Yeah.
But then most entrepreneurs don't realize that you've signed agreements. You've signed a lease. You've signed a 5-year lease. And now you're going to break the lease.
Yes.
And these guys are going to come after you with everything they've got, And that's when you realize you need a lawyer.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do you think it's in the beginning not so much, but when they threw the baby and the sink at you, you felt like now I need.
No, in the beginning you don't think you need a lawyer.
Yeah.
When you're a new entrepreneur, everything is winning.
Yes.
Somebody said there's no business plan that doesn't show going down.
Yeah.
From month one, the graph goes like this. Nobody will write a business plan and say, you know what, I think for the first 6 months we might not break even.
Yeah.
For the next 6 months we might break even, and then looking at the way it goes, December might not be such a great month, and January might not be. And then February might pick up. So a lot of people, when they write business plans, they write a business plan with a graph that just shoots up. So in that case, you don't think you're going to get into trouble 100%. For anything, because your mind says I'm winning, right? But once we finished 3 years in Wonder Park, your mind was like, you're winning, but you must be smart, right?
Yeah.
So moving to the theater, we knew that these guys are going to come after us.
Yes.
So we put everything in trust.
Okay.
So we were directors in the company, but the company was in trust.
So the learning is we're moving from Wonder Park.
Yeah.
There's a learning here
that
says now we've built this. We know that, like you say, I mean, I listen to a lot of musicians, they sign contracts and then after I couldn't break or whatever. But then you find a loophole out of this. Right?
Yeah, we did.
You found a loophole. Is this through having a lawyer?
Many loopholes.
Many loopholes.
That's where you realize the good thing, you need a lawyer.
You need a lawyer. Okay.
A good one.
Not a
lawyer.
Not just a lawyer.
A good one.
A good lawyer.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, 2, what I'm picking up now is your circle of influence also matters, though.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's also this thing, I think, somebody,
Yeah.
but your relationship capital versus your social capital.
Yeah.
There's part of having a relationship with somebody who came to your restaurant.
Yeah.
And then they then say, look, I actually have this connect. But then you showing up, because there's also this thing, right?
True,
that it's not about just who you know, it's also you showed up, right? You showed up and said, this is where I am.
Yeah.
So then you move to town, then you find the loophole, you put everything in trust.
Yeah.
I think you also have to go on to say, what's the build? Because then, remember, this is big, hairy, audacious. It's the state theatre.
Yeah. But you see, the beauty of it was, now it goes back to the reason why I was on site all the time.
Yeah.
We moved to the theatre, and when we moved to the theatre, we had already finished building. So we build while we were running
in tandem.
While
you're running
We're
building here.
We're building at the theatre.
Yes.
Now, I then designed the space.
Yes.
I then get the guy who did the fittings.
Yes.
For Pretoria North.
Yes.
And the guy comes and works with me.
Okay.
Right? We then start building this restaurant.
Yeah.
We had 30 days to build it.
Yes.
And I mean, it was a huge space. 30 days.
That's a huge space.
Yeah. It was
How many square meters was it?
It was over 2,000 square meters.
Sure.
Yeah, but I mean, split into 3 areas. Yeah. But I mean, the kitchen was huge.
Yeah.
6 showers, 6 cooler rooms, work storage. And so the kitchen itself was a restaurant.
Yes.
In size.
Yes.
Right? But it was a beautiful space because now our rent had dropped from 50 grand to 32 grand.
Okay.
Because now we're paying to the Department of Arts and Culture. That's now our
that's your
our landlord.
Yeah, that's your landlord.
Right?
Yeah.
And also the fact that moving into the theatre, into an existing restaurant, the theatre says, okay, we will sort out the kitchen.
Yes.
Because that's your biggest expense.
Okay.
Yeah. They said, okay, that stove doesn't work. Okay, we'll buy a new stove.
Okay.
This is 46,000 rand.
Yeah.
46,000 rand worth of stove.
Yes.
Yeah, we're not talking Univa.
No.
Yeah.
Stove. Yeah.
And they're like, okay, so what don't you like? DB bot fix that, blah. And then...
Which cuts down on your capex.
It does. It does. I mean, it cost us about 3 million to move.
True.
So that's less having to do the kitchen.
The kitchen and all
and that kitchen was massive.
No, that kitchen was big.
And we just put a lipstick on the place.
Yeah.
Rebuild the bottom place. Redesign and rebuild the bottom place. Customize it. Give it the same character.
Yeah.
As best as we could.
Yes.
And put identifying marks.
Yes.
Design wise.
Yes.
In the restaurant so that people can find familiarity.
Yes.
So they don't come to a new spot and get lost.
Okay.
You know how sometimes when we grew up, we knew how improve up like how would
Yeah.
And I think we were too lazy to think about the why. We thought no,
Yeah.
But I think what it is that they feel lost.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't have that familiarity.
Yes, it doesn't feel like home.
Yeah.
So they're not sure if it's the same space that's going to offer them the same thing.
Yeah.
And fortunately for us is that all our clients were in town. Then they brought friends that they've been telling about the Pretoria North.
Yes.
So they multiply.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
They multiply. From the offices, they're like, this place that I was telling you about, it's now down the road.
Yes.
So rather than sit in traffic to go to Midrand, Josie, let's go sit at the theatre.
Yes, true.
We are across from the Reserve Bank.
Yes.
The guys started using our private rooms for their meetings. Right?
Yes.
Then we get covered by Justice Malala in Financial Mail page. Right? That gives us a lot of clout.
Yes.
Right? Then we get featured by GQ.
Yes.
That gives us a lot of clout.
Yes.
Then you and I, that's where you come into the picture.
That's when I come into the picture. Yes.
We started in Pretoria North. I think that our journey started in Pretoria North, where you started helping us with your experience to say, I think this is how you can craft this thing better. Right?
Yeah.
And we do the Tshwane Wine Fest in 2011.
That's 2011, yes.
And I get a call from the mayor's office to say, but I don't understand how you do such a big thing in the city.
How do you do a wine festival in the city
without us knowing? So Minister of Electricity says, come sit with me, let's talk.
Let's have a conversation.
We went together.
We did, yeah.
So we went together, we went and sat there, and that's when you started realizing, I always hated doing business with government, because for me, I don't like the bureaucracy of it all.
Yeah.
And that's where it came to play. They wanted to be a part of what we were doing, that we did successfully with Macro and all the other wine brands. But they then wanted to own
the equity of
it, right?
Yeah.
Which didn't sit well with me.
No.
Right. And funny enough is that in the beginning when we moved, Capello took us to court. That's part of the challenges, right?
Well, interestingly, they were your neighbor in Pretoria North, and you find them again.
Yeah, I find them again at the theatre. And first day of opening, I get served with papers.
Yes.
And then I'm on Shwashwi over the weekend. for destroying this guy's life that I just met.
That you just met.
And I don't know anything about.
Yeah.
Now I'm pulled into a fight I don't know anything about.
Yeah.
The 2 months down the line, the sheriff is outside trying to take everything because the other guys are like, hey, dude, you know? And that's why I said, you know, this is where you need a lawyer, you need to be smart, you need to be fast, you need to think fast.
Yes.
And with the mayor's office, that's what we did.
Yes,
we were like, from our own assessment, we were like, nah, this is
no, we're not going to take it. So
these guys want to own this thing and they want to take and run with it. So, you know, we then grew in that space. We started offering live bands on Thursdays, which became a very popular Thursday. You know, but then we started thinking, how do you make a restaurant work on a daily basis? Because our biggest challenge is you open a restaurant, it's empty on Monday, it's empty on Tuesday, but then and then it gets quiet.
It gets quiet,
That's when you start evolving. You know, you're still in the same business.
Yes.
But you always have to constantly evolve because there's so many moving pieces.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And I was blessed with the team that I found because OSLC, who became the manager, became Afro Lounge.
Yes.
And I was like, thank God. Because in Pretoria North, everybody wanted, okay, Ashley.
Well, everybody came to see you, right?
So, I'm like, but you're there to eat. You're not there to see me. So at the theater, that's what helped. The team that we had, OSLC leading the team.
Yes.
And also, because we dealt with Macro, with the wine festival.
Yes.
I then asked the manager at Macro, I said, but how do you manage all the stock? Because I never really processed it or thought about it, you know, at a mass scale to say, how do they actually manage Macro? You know, and he said no, but the guy working at the soft drink aisles, he doesn't care about what happens at camping.
No,
that's his job.
That's his job. He's focused.
He needs to give me a report. Camping needs to give me a report. Electronics needs to give. Bottle store needs to give me. And I was like, okay. I knew I needed to do this, but I didn't know how to implement it. Right. And I think part of the reason why I mentioned this was you raised the issue. To say, how do you guys manage? And we then started to say, okay, because the other restaurant was small, we didn't have to have a particular structure.
No, you didn't.
But with this restaurant, we started saying, okay,
structure,
so OSLC as a GM runs the whole restaurant.
Yes.
And then we have somebody who's responsible for the coffee shop.
Yes.
As a cost center.
Yes.
We have somebody who's responsible for the bar.
Yes.
As a cost center.
Yeah.
We've got the kitchen as a cost center.
Yeah.
So at the end of the month, we are able to see that the kitchen covers its own salary and stock and profit.
Yes.
The bar does the same and the coffee shop does the same. You know?
Yes.
And then it became a lot easier
to
manage.
Yes.
Then I could be less and less at the restaurant. And focus on now being, because, you know, you start a business, you're creative.
Yes.
But once you're knee deep in it, the creativity goes out of the window.
So
all your ideas are not fresh anymore. And sometimes it's good to step out and be on the outside and let other people run. Yes. And then thanks to you that, I mean, for a couple of months or a couple of years, you were there to kind of cover my bases. And it really made a hell of a difference. The fact that the State Theatre itself had a good program going for 3 years.
100%.
Yeah. So we knew we were going to be profitable for the next 3 years.
For the next 3 years.
Based on what they were running.
So Braesh, you run a restaurant.
Yep.
Over 3 years, become profitable. You want to build. You want to move forward.
Yeah.
What's the next step? Where's the next learning?
I think the next learning was when the restaurant started facing challenges.
Yeah.
State Theatre changes management.
Yes.
That then puts us in, and also the city starts renovation.
Yes.
When they build a new mayor's office.
Okay.
And that started giving us challenges.
Yes.
Because then there's less shows being done at the theatre.
Yeah.
There's less traffic coming our way because of all the construction.
Yes.
And we come into the end of our lease.
Yes.
Right? So at the end of our lease, we had to decide which way do we want to go. You know, do we stay? Do we go?
Yeah.
But also personal issues were
Yes.
also at play.
Yeah.
You know? So then that final decision was, if we re-sign, we're not going to make it.
Yes.
We're not going to make it 3 months. We're not going to make it 6 months.
Yeah.
And a lot of entrepreneurs want to hang on to that dream.
Yeah.
Come hell or
high water,
And somebody had said to me years before,
yes,
when I just started, he said, you need to let go. I was like, he doesn't know what he's talking about because
and
and alona is able business. So you tend to have this thing, you're telling me about something you read, but have you done it? You know? And practically it's not impossible because it's practically it's not possible because you invest so much of yourself into these projects. You invest so much of yourself into these businesses. And when you have to let go, you know, it's like marrying your child off. You know? And but at the time where the decision had to be made, I realized that it doesn't matter how much I love this place, it doesn't matter how much this place has played a role in my life, but it's time. I think the biggest fear was what's next. Because I didn't know what was next.
Okay.
Right? I'm losing a restaurant, I'm getting divorced, I'm moving back home. You know, just a whole lot happening in my life at a go. You know, and having to reckon with all of that. You know, and even with the divorce, I'm saying, okay, I'm gonna keep the boys. But I don't have a plan. You know? And that's where you learn to reinvent yourself. I now understand single mothers. I'm not saying I'm one, but I got to understand single mothers. Because you have these eyes looking at you, these mouths that depend on you.
There's an option.
To reinvent yourself and move. You don't have time to even mourn what is happening.
You gotta move.
You gotta move. You know? So we did Chicken Warehouse was the next project. We spoke to Daybreak, Afgri. Afgri gave us a container. We started selling chicken in bulk to all these Pakistanis and Sudanese and Somalis. Sorry, and then that project obviously it's not in our control. They mess it up. I had to reinvent myself
again.
In that process, I started thinking, how do I document? Because a friend of mine, BT, said to me, you need to write something about your experience.
Yes, true.
And I started putting down my thoughts.
Okay.
But as I was putting down my thoughts, they became a training manual. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It evolved by itself. To say I had time on my hands. No longer I had a restaurant. And I was back home. At my parents' house with my kids. And now I've got all this time. I start writing all this, morphs into a training manual, and then somebody calls and says, listen, I've got this restaurant and a wedding venue. I don't know what's going on here. So I go help, obviously then I have to do a fee structure.
Of course.
Come up with a fee structure, did a bit of research. Gave them an invoice, they paid the invoice. I was like, I can make money doing this.
Make money doing this.
But this was soft stuff, rearrange restaurant, organize the back end. How do we do this? You know what I mean? Split the wedding venue as a cost center to the restaurant. And the what do they call them? The rooms that they had there. And then from that guy, somebody else called and said, listen, we've got this restaurant in the township and it doesn't look great. And we're starting to compete with other places. And I went, it was on a Sunday, I went there and we sat there and I looked at the space and the guy was like, hey man, I've got some money, I want to renovate. What I didn't know was that a new business is coming. It's being born. It's being born. And I didn't also know that I thought it would be a lipstick approach to this business. You know? And the guy was like, why don't we break everything and start from scratch? I was like, break everything? I've never built anything in my life. I find spaces and I convert spaces. And I enjoy it. But then started Mbako Restaurant Consulting because I had a lot of people start calling me to consult. And with Mbako Restaurant Consulting, the initial idea was we do staff training. We help the restaurant with the back end in the kitchen, menu costing, and all of that. The things that they need to save money and make money. But then people started saying, arrange this, pull this there, but the flow of the restaurant. So you realize that you can't do that training with a messed up restaurant. You have to organize the restaurant.
You know what I mean? Space.
For it to be profitable. It's not just training the staff.
No.
But if the environment is not going to help the staff to make money, then the restaurant don't make money. The training becomes useless. So with the new space, hashtag Meet Cafe, that was a pivoting part for me as a consultant.
Okay.
We had to break the restaurant, whole of it. Redesign the whole structure from the beginning. Build it up. everything custom made. And that for me, then I pulled the guy that built my second restaurant, my first and my second restaurant.
Yes.
Partnered with him.
Yeah.
And that's when we started building this restaurant.
Yes.
And like I said, everything custom made.
Yeah.
You know, it was the most exciting thing I've ever done.
Oh, wow.
Most exciting thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
And, you know, as I was building this thing was growing. Obviously, I'm re-looking at how I documented this thing.
Yeah.
You know, my training manual, my manuals and
yeah.
And that in itself grew as well.
Yeah.
You know, started training the staff. And with the training, I started introducing product knowledge and started designing their brands.
Yeah.
And then the next restaurant came about.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that I did the same thing for them.
Yeah.
They were in a mall, found a space, consulted with them and built that restaurant. In that time, there's an old friend that we went to school together, fashion design. Yeah. My first year.
Okay.
Met her in 1989 at TUT or previously Strugelo.
Yeah.
And now she's doing what I'm doing, but she's doing it for homes.
Yeah.
We hadn't seen each other for a long time.
Yes.
So I said, okay, listen, there's a project I'm doing. Do you want to come look at it? Give me some advice. I was almost at the end of the project.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, no, I like what you're doing, whatever. And we started talking.
Yeah.
And that then evolved to what I'm currently doing, which is interior architecture. Okay. Company called Zen Lifestyle Concept. Okay. And my business partner is Morongwe Lehai. Yes. Now we've known each other, 36 years? Yeah. We now, all that partnership and creativity and
comes together.
It's doing amazing things. Yeah. It's been 3 years of hard work, and we're just going, man. We're just going.
So you pivot from a restaurant owner.
Yeah.
From design. Let's talk from that, because that's the more important bit, right?
Yeah.
You build from design. Design feeds into culture.
Yeah.
It feeds into art. It feeds into the music. It feeds into the food.
Yeah.
And it now creates a harmony or a synchronization of all these things that make up space. Yeah. So from design to having dinner in my home, eating at a nice table, I'm assuming, then from a design point of view, from an interior decoration to the wall to everything else that you have. But then you have gin on the table.
So Native was born at the theater.
Okay.
We started with wine.
Yeah.
So we used to white label wine.
Yes.
So that to introduce people to the different types of wine.
Yeah.
Because a lot of our clients were natural sweet red, natural sweet wine. And we were like, I was so frustrated. I was like, because you can't sell a Chardonnay, you can't sell a Sauvignon Blanc, you can't sell a Cabernet.
Yes.
Because these people are only exposed to natural white or natural
100%.
red,
Yeah.
and it must be sweet.
Yes, it has to be sweet.
So we then looked for blends that would speak to their palate.
Yeah.
And that's how this was born.
Yes.
Then we were like, okay, cool, let's white label cigars. I still had a lot of crew connection.
Yes.
Crew brought me cigars that were unlabeled.
Yeah.
Especially from New York.
Yeah.
Then I would put a label on them. Which had our brand.
Yeah.
I think for me, that was when the love for branding started.
That's it, yeah.
Then we thought, let's do a keg, like our own in-house beer, right? So with the in-house beer, the concept was a Beer Republic. Beer Republic then had to say, okay, so if we do Beer Republic, what would be the actual brand? The company would be Beer Republic.
Yeah.
But what would be the actual brand?
Yeah.
Then the actual brand would be Native Lager.
Okay.
Now, this influence comes from, so when I did the research about beer brewing, it went back to Sophiatown, it went back to Marabastad.
Yes.
It went back to Alexander, it went back to the Eastern Cape.
Yes.
Beer brewing, not only, I'm talking about African beer, right? Had been something that we've done for years as Africans, not just South Africans.
Yeah, as Africans. Yeah.
We brewed beer.
Yeah.
And it became part of our culture and how we celebrate.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Every time there's something that happens, there's an aunt or a gogo who's going to put together mqombothi.
Yes.
And even that, is passed down from one generation to the other.
Yeah.
But it's not formal.
No.
There's no like, and when that person passes on, funny enough, the family never has a void.
No. There's always
somebody that takes over that role and moves with it.
Yeah.
But then you also realize that there's more to the history.
Yes.
Then I start picking up the word native, and I start picking up the word used by our old government.
Yes.
the Native Act of 1929, the Native Act of,
the Native Act,
and now I'm reading about beer in South Africa and the culture of beer in South Africa, and this word keeps coming up.
Yes,
right.
With beer, with the prohibition and the natives.
Yes, with the prohibitions and the natives 100%. Not being able to drink in town, and then with the Shebeen queens and the Shebeen structure, how politically it influenced change and influenced society to stand up and stand for themselves.
Yes.
And I thought it's a very powerful story.
Yeah.
Only told from a political point of view. But there's these people that are being ignored. The people that made it happen.
Yes.
That put them komboti on the table.
Yeah.
And then you get Bo Patlamaro Sech, Takonyesi, Tototo.
Yes.
Yeah. And then people started distilling.
Yes, they started distilling,
And it's been an old thing. I mean, when I said started, it's not like they started after the beer. They've always been making Tototo.
Tototo,
and in the distilling of Tototo, the only difference, that's why I call Pitor Nevisa Patlama Research, because how we knew because of blackout.
Yeah.
And the whole point to it is, as I got to learn more about distilling, is that they couldn't regulate the alcohol level.
Yes.
So you could be drinking 60-70% alcohol. That's why. So in all that, that's when native lager grew, because when you study these things and you do research, it doesn't end on beer. It just speaks to brewing, distilling, and obviously speaks about alcohol as a whole eventually.
As a whole,
and then we stuck onto the beer idea, did a few mock-ups, how look and feel, what do you want to feel, how do you want the label to look, what is the story we're going to tell, because now I'm getting wiser as far as brands are concerned. What is the story we want to tell? We don't want to tell a story of drinking and getting drunk. But how do you tell a story? And then we looked at the word native and it says belonging to a place by birth or by origin. So it depends on what you're talking about. So we felt that the word native is a very powerful story. If you think about the word nigger, which is used in pop culture, but it's history. And how it has evolved, and they've owned it,
and they've owned it,
and monetized it.
Not only did they, but they monetized.
They monetized
proper,
right? And I realized how a lot of us don't really understand that the reason why the South African government, the old South African government, changed it from native toilet and European toilet, and changed the word native from the toilets or native spaces to non-Europeans. Because they realized native means belonging to a place.
This is yours.
It says these are the people who belong here. But they wanted to change that narrative. But with all those signs, native bus stop or native this, it said, okay, this is for the people that belong
who are
here.
native to the land.
So it didn't do well for them. So I love the history behind the name. I love the history of brewing and distilling. And that's how native was born. But then when we were ready to go to market and ready to put money into product, I spoke to a guy called Danny. He used to be the manager for the bottle store at the Spa in Wonder Park.
In Wonder Park, okay.
So I had a chat to him. I said, listen, how's this craft beer? Does it sell? How is it moving? Do people buy it? And Danny was like, dude, do yourself a favor. If you want to go any craft route, go spirit.
Okay.
And I went home. I've put so much energy into this. And I was like, what am I going to do? Same night, I went to Google, found a distiller, sent a WhatsApp, went to sleep. 10 minutes later, I get a message. Hey, how's it? This is how much I charge. This is how I work. I was like, okay, can I see you tomorrow? Went through, saw the guy, spoke to Francois. His name is Francois Juet. Spoke to Francois. And Francois said, okay, what do you want? I said, these are the flavor profiles I like because I cook. So it was when he explained the whole concept. I didn't do research, by the way. I just jumped onto it. All right? So when he explained it and he showed me around, I was like, so this is spices. You just need to decide
which spices.
What do you want? Right?
Yeah.
So it's spices, it's plants, it's citrus. You just need to decide what you want. So we decided on a few recipes and he said, I'll do samples. Did samples. A week later, we tasted a few samples and he had one that was a surprise sample. Right? So the idea then started morphing. So in the time that he was doing samples, obviously I did more research. Right? And I liked the concept. I liked the idea. I liked everything about it. And then Native was born.
Okay.
Right? 15 different botanicals in Native gin. And Native gin is honeybush based.
Okay.
Right? So the main botanical in Native is honeybush. Right? So that becomes the classic, that becomes the base for Native culture, for Native karakara. Right?
Yes.
So the the surprise recipe that he did was taking native and putting hibiscus in it.
Okay.
Because I had spoken to him about hibiscus.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Having experienced hibiscus in China,
Yes.
having experienced hibiscus in West Africa.
Yes.
And he said, I was listening to you, I took native, put some hibiscus in it. I want you to try it.
Yeah.
And native culture was born.
Okay.
So when we launched the two, native and native culture, right?
Okay.
The base is native.
Yeah.
So 45% alcohol.
Yeah.
Because we've got 15 different plants in it.
Yes.
And citrus and roots, right?
Yeah.
And then a year later, we decided let's do a fun project.
Yeah.
We did Karakara. Most people, because I'm from Pretoria, they think Karave.
Yes, of course.
No,
but not
Karakara. It's actually the name of the orange.
Okay, yes.
That we use.
Okay.
To make the gin.
Okay.
Right?
So it's called Karakara.
The orange is called Karakara.
Okay.
So in South Africa, around August is harvest time.
Yeah.
And then up to August, September, up to October, then you no longer find Karakara in shops. So food lovers market, checkers, whatever, will have Karakara.
Yes.
Around that period of time.
And then
but also something that we learned when we did Karakara, the following batch, was that your early harvest doesn't work better. It doesn't work well. What works better is your late harvest.
Okay.
So you have to actually use the end of season.
Yeah.
Because then the riper,
yes, the more flavor. Yeah.
So, and that was born. And then a couple of years later, we spoke about barrel aged gin. So, because once you start, you can't stop. You want to learn, you want to read, And Pula was paying tribute to my mother-in-law. And I say mother-in-law because when you get divorced, you don't divorce the family.
No.
It's between you and your wife. But it doesn't impact.
No.
Because they're from Botswana and two of my children were born in Botswana. And Pula had a very big impact for me. Not as a currency, but the fact that rain is seen as a big currency.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Not as in Botswana currency, but it's a currency.
As in the currency for
farmers, for farmers, for land.
Yeah, for land.
It's a big currency for us. But also, the first rains, which means they clean the earth, right?
Yes.
And I thought it's such a powerful story because I wanted everything to tell a story.
Okay.
I didn't want it to be alcohol. I wanted to tell a story.
Yeah.
So Pula was born, which is a sorghum-based gin with cardamom and nutmeg, and then we do mqomboti, distill it, add alcohol, add neutral spirit in it, water obviously.
Yeah.
And then we barrel age it in French oak for 9 months.
Oh, wow.
And then we pre-sell when we are about to bottle.
Bottle, yeah.
And that became our reserve product.
Yeah.
So that's the 4 natives, as we call them. So the first were the 3 natives, and now the 4 natives. The 4 natives, yeah. And then we started, we're doing well as far as the brand is concerned.
Yes.
And purely because we come from a space where we had clients.
Yes.
So the clients from the restaurant became the clients for the new venture.
Yeah.
And they actually brought more with them.
Yeah.
And we also started looking at what we call beyond liquid.
Yes.
What do we do beyond liquid?
Yeah.
It's one thing to make alcohol.
To make alcohol, yeah.
But what do you do?
Yeah.
Beyond liquid.
Yeah.
Then we started, because I come from a restaurant culture.
Yes.
We started then saying, okay, Alexis, you're a chef. We're going to give you 15 different botanicals.
Yes.
You curate a 3-course meal.
Yeah.
Or a 5-course meal.
Yes.
Whatever you want to do.
Yes.
The food the menu doesn't have to be alcoholic.
Yeah.
But you can incorporate, and then we can do a pairing.
Yeah.
So we can do a pairing with native, a pairing with culture, a pairing with karakara.
Yes.
And that's how the brand started evolving into a culture, because we wanted people to buy into this thing. And even with that, we didn't want a big sitting. We limited it to 20 people.
Yeah.
We'd end up with 25, 30.
Yeah.
Which was okay, we could accommodate. But it made it so special because we could curate it and let people start asking questions and retelling the story.
Yes.
And then they go out and tell the story.
Yes.
And then the clothing range followed, because that was another thing. Beyond liquid, what do we do? Yeah. Right? Then we started the clothing range, which is the native spirit. Then we're like, okay, native spirit, maybe that should be a nice ring to a trade name. Yes. Because the company is the Distilling Natives.
Yes. So then
trading as native
spirits. Yeah.
But then on a brand, at least even if a child is wearing a sweater, it doesn't say
alcohol. Yeah.
It says native spirit. The child is embracing his
native spirit.
Yes. And the play on spirit can be your spirit, or the spirit.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And it was such an exciting process.
Yes.
But also, we looked at what other big brands are doing in the market,
Yes.
which we did with Afro as well.
Yes.
And we realized that a lot of brands are attached to sports.
Yeah.
I don't play sports. I don't like sports. I don't watch sports.
Yeah.
And I had to pick the most boring of sports, but the most exciting of sports.
Which is golf.
Yeah, it was boring when I didn't know.
Yes.
Got exciting when I got to know.
Okay.
And with the golfers, we created a culture around
Yes.
golf for the brand. But what helped us is that a lot of the golf courses the golf games that we sponsored were foundation based.
Yes.
So these guys were playing golf to benefit society. So either we're building libraries through Maru's Literacy for Life, or we're doing Dokitladi's foundation, which helps the hospices in Garangua and the old age homes in Garangua, or Tsilame, which is now soon, which actually buys uniform for school kids north in Taung, those areas in the northwest. And these are boys that came from these areas and now are paying it back. And I wanted to be a part of that.
Yes.
Instead of saying, don't drink and drive. Yeah. I wanted to live the thing of change through the brand. Right? Yeah. We've heard that message generationally of don't drink and drive. We still do. Yeah, we still do. Even with Uber, you still drink.
You still. Right? Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's a lost message, but we wanted a different approach. How do we pay it back? How do we change? How do we influence? And that helped us to do that with the golf. So that was an amazing thing for us. And then the past 2 years we've been focusing on export. We're now available in Botswana. We're available in Namibia. Yeah. We're now certified in Tanzania. Okay. We're about to launch Tanzania this year. Okay. Yeah. So that's where that puts us.
So prolific journey, right? Ash, 1973 to 2024. Some would say it's it, but I think there's lots to do. Yeah. Right? I really want to reflect back. I mean, you've spoken quite a lot about your life. Yeah. And almost for you, I want to know what that golden thread is for you. I have a golden thread. Yeah. What is your golden thread? If you were to reflect, if you were to sit and be the narrator of your own story like you have, I mean, proverbially you have. Yeah. But what is that golden thread? What is the key takeaway you would say you would want when the one great scorer comes and stands on a podium and says, this is what Ashley gave to the world? Yeah. What would that be?
That's a tough one. Mm-hmm. That's a tough one. I think I will respond in this way. Yeah. I found that I became a very resilient person. That's number one. Number two, I became a very consistent person. Yeah. Because failure didn't define me. I was consistent in starting. Well, it doesn't matter whether I failed, I will start again. Okay. Yeah. And if I failed, I'll start again. If I failed, I start again. Yeah. And I was consistent. I was consistent in that journey. And hard work, and focus. Yes. And I think that had been the thread of my life. Yeah. From school, at some point I was like, why am I doing maths and science? I want to pass my trick. Yeah. Let me just finish this thing. Yeah, I just want to finish this thing. Yeah. And now, 2025, 2024, 2023, you go on TikTok or you go on socials and people are like, choose a career, especially January. Yeah. Don't choose a career you're passionate about. Choose a career that's going to make you live because you need a Porsche. Yes. You need a Porsche. Yeah. So, and I think my mind and my brain and my creativity has offered the world spaces that they can be in. It has, from a restaurant point of view, it offered a space where you could lose yourself. Yes. Yes. And for that moment, you don't have to worry about or regular meleke or school fees or for a while you could be in this space and imagine your life differently. And the music that came with it was a gift. Yes. It was a gift. From Encore to Press to, we covered a lot of people who are popular now. Yes, who are popular and then now. Were starting out. Yeah. And we gave them a platform. So the giving was not just to the clients. Yes. it was also giving to the other people.
Yes.
But I see that through Native and Zen, the same thing happens.
Okay.
You know, Moronge and I took in interns 2 years ago.
Yes.
And these kids have now evolved into, you know, very creative individuals.
Yes.
They came to us as interns, so we didn't really plant anything in them.
Yeah.
But we helped them water what was already in them, and we helped them grow in that level. But one thing I've also learned from that experience is that with the interns, they poured into us.
Yes.
Things that you know, young minds would bring into a business.
Yeah.
And you know, because you have humility, you don't have a sense of, but this guy can't teach me anything as an intern. But you actually submit yourself to the learning to say, you know, there's something very special about these kids. You know, young as they are, they have fresh minds, they have fresh perspective. Yeah. And yes, that fresh perspective sometimes needs to be molded. Yeah. You know, and I suppose that's what internship is molding that whole. Yeah. And I loved it. And you know, with Native, I've seen the giving back through foundations. Yes. And also we developed our own foundation, which is Native Care Foundation. Is that we do care as natives for other natives. Yes. Right? And I think that golden thread is exactly that. It's, you know, from an individual point of view, being consistent, being, you know, resilient through trials and tribulation of this journey. And gratitude. Being grateful for everything. Yeah. Even the failures, because in them there's a lesson. In them there's growth. Yes. You know, it's not you fail, you're stuck. Yeah. You know, and sometimes it happens, you know, because sometimes our own fears, having experienced failure, keep us back. Yeah. But the golden thread for me, I think, is being able to create spaces, whether in a restaurant space or through Zen. Yeah. For people to experience themselves. You know, we have a saying at Zen, be the energy you want to experience. You know? Yeah. And it does help in a sense that we can give you that energy. We can create a space for that energy. Yeah. But it's your energy. It's your energy. Yeah. You just encapsulate it into a being. Yeah. So Ash, I think I'm very grateful. I think the gratitude bit that you've just said now is key for me, because I'm grateful for the fact that, one, I think a lot of people take it for granted, the people that they have within their space, right? We look at celebrity in a different way and how we inspire ourselves, and we build these ideas of castles in the sky, perhaps of wanting to be like other people. And what you've done specifically is to build a story and a history for yourself, so that your children and those that come behind you, born from your mother and your father, who were also consistent. I mean, when you talk about that consistency, take it back, Mama le Papa, the consistency, the creativity, the bringing of that music wasn't born out of you. It came with you. Your father was a singer. And you almost carry that, you know, the native, the spirit of the people that you bring with you. And for me, that is the golden thread, is that you have told a story consistently of change, and not, because it's really scary to change, and you have to go through pain to change. And almost this triumphant telling of the story doesn't go without the challenges, doesn't go without the pain. And I'm so blessed that you're like my first guest on BlaqPod, you know, because you are an everyday person. You and it's in that everyday person that we find the gems that we work with. So thank you. No, it's a pleasure.